Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Ministry of Health Virtual Media Conference, where we provide you with current and accurate information on the Ministry's COVID-19 response. Today in studio, we have with us the Honorable Terence Dayal Singh, Minister of Health, Dr. Avery Hines, Director of the Epidemiology Division of the Ministry of Health, Mr. Faz Khan, Director of Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division at the Ministry, and Dr. Carla Maria Alexander from the Faculty of Medical Sciences at the UWI St. Augustine campus. We go straight now to Dr. Hines with the clinical and epidemiological updates.
Thank you, Ms. Alcantara. Good morning to the Minister. Good morning to my colleagues, Mr. Khan and Dr. Alexander. Good morning to members of the media and members of the viewing and listening public. The clinical update for the day completed February 26th as at 4 p.m. stands as follows. At that date and time, we had completed 95,859 tests between the public and private health testing systems, and of those, 7,704 tests would have returned positive. We would have 7,445 patients who have already recovered, and 120 total active cases at this point in time. Those 120 cases being broken down as follows. There are 10 patients currently hospitalized, and we'll speak about their distribution in a moment. There are 100 persons currently in home isolation. There are 3 in step-down facilities. And between yesterday and today, we would have confirmed 7 additional cases out of samples received in the preceding 48 hours. There are, at this point in time, 139 fatalities from COVID-19. We extend our condolences to the members of those bereaved families. With respect to those hospitalized, all 10 are in the Couva Medical and Multi-Training Facility, with 3 of them in ICU. And with respect to those in the step-down facilities, those 3 are all at the UWI Debe facility. That brings me to the end of the clinical update. We'll proceed directly into the epidemiologic update with the first slide. Next, please. As we can see, with the epidemiologic update, we have continued the trend of showing the epi curve from the peak of the epidemic down to the present time. And we again emphasize that the outstanding feature of this at this time is that we have trended slowly but steadily downwards to the point that we are currently at, with a rolling average of about 5 cases per day. Now, while the average number of cases per day is quite low at this point in time, it bears emphasis that we are not free of or clear of COVID. Up to February 26th, we will have recorded 554 cases of COVID for 2021. That is not an insignificant number. We are continuing to emphasize the importance of the contact tracing and of the recollections of those individuals who are positive on where they've been and with whom they may have been in contact, both in terms of preventing spread and also in terms of looking for source of infection. So that continuing action and activity is extremely important as we get down to the lower numbers and we try to get back to having no cases at all. That's going to take some work, and we're working hard at it alongside the county medical officers of health, and we will keep you posted as the trend continues to unfold. Next, please. The positives remain basically as we've been describing them over the past few weeks, with basically a 50-50 distribution between men and women, slight preponderance of men, 53.3% at this point in time. The majority of the cases being in that active working age group of 25 to 49 years of age, and notably the cases below 19 are small in number. The width of that pyramid at the bottom is what we call constricted, showing that we have managed to reduce the rate of spread among that under 19 age group, the school-aged age group, and we continue to pay close attention to that school-aged age group as we have launched the Form 4, 5, and 6 students back to face-to-face classes on a limited basis. So far, we have not seen changes in the rates of illness within that age group that indicate that there is an issue, and we want to commend those who have been taking all the precautions seriously, who have been doing all that needs to be done, even as they begin to move around to go to their class, to reduce the risk of spread. The physical distancing, the mask wearing, the hand hygiene, all of this is continuing to do its part in keeping the rate of spread low, and we want to ask people to continue to do it and to commend them for having done so thus far. Next slide, please. With respect to the fatalities, we see that 3-to-1 sort of ratio of males to females. Basically 74.1% of the fatalities have been male, and more than 66% of them have been in the over 60 age group. Most notably, the risk factors that are more likely associated with an adverse outcome continue to be individuals who have pre-existing comorbid conditions, other chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, on treatment for cancers, etc. Those things that then give the body a little more of a difficulty in responding to this new infection. So again, we're emphasizing the importance of protection of all individuals, but especially those who have the higher risks because of the enhanced vulnerability with their comorbid conditions. And next slide, please. And with respect to the geographic distribution, we are seeing, again, smaller numbers in all of the communities. We are seeing that in the legend, those rectangles off to the right, the darkest rectangle, the highest number in a given community, is now 5 cases over the 2-week period that this represents, and that the cases seem to be concentrated to some extent, mostly in the Caroni, Victoria, St. Patrick area. We're seeing some activity in St. George West. We do see cases in the other counties, but smaller in numbers. So we do want to continue to encourage people across the country, regardless of whether you're seeing lots of cases in your community or not, to adhere to the public health guidelines. Of note, we see that we haven't seen any cases in Tobago over the past several weeks, over the past at least 4 weeks. We haven't had any cases cropping up in the communities in Tobago, and this is despite their very active surveillance system for testing respiratory illness for COVID-19. So this is a good sign, and we want to, again, encourage those who are doing the right thing, who are following the guidelines, to continue to do so, because it is having the desired effect, and we want to drive the number of cases back down to 0. With that, I bring the epidemiologic update to an end and turn you back over to Ms. Alcantara.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hines, for always keeping us up to date with what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm pleased now to welcome my colleague, Mr. Faz Khan, first time on the conference, and we go to him for his presentation on substandard, falsified, and fake drugs and vaccines.
Hi, good morning, viewers. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to discuss the topic on substandard, falsified, and fake drugs. Just to set the context of the presentation and to differentiate the difference between those 3 categories of drugs. So can I go to the first slide, please? The second one? The third one? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so in terms of the context, there are different definitions. So what we have looked at is substandard drugs that basically indicate that a drug has not met the specification as per the manufacturer specification, as per the particular API or the excipient. Unregistered drug now is drugs that have not gone through any sort of regulatory assessment, evaluation, no approval for a particular region or particular country, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. And falsified drug is drug that is completely, doesn't have any sort of API that will give you any sort of protection if it is the particular drug is used, and is normally the intended purpose is really to deceive the public and to gain some sort of economic gain. Next slide, please. In terms of the regulatory body in Trinidad and Tobago, we do have the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, CFDD, as well as the Drug Inspectorate. These two bodies are mainly responsible for regulating drugs, which include antibiotic, narcotics, and then all other third schedule, OTC, and all other drugs that is designed for our markets. There's close collaboration with other border agencies, such as Customs and Excise, and this is important that assists us in certain degree of regulation and maintaining our presence at the border to determine whether there's any drug that falls under the 3 different categories that may enter into our borders. Next slide, please. What we are seeing, and is a worldwide phenomena, where criminals are using the COVID situation, and based on WHO data, it would indicate that approximately 4.4 million units of illicit pharmaceuticals have been traded internationally. Some of these drugs include anti-cancer medication, hypnotic and sedative agents, anabolic steroids, nervous system agents, dermatological agents, vitamins. Okay. In this slide, we have demonstrated or shown in terms of seizure by both the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division as well as the Drug Inspectorate. So in 2020, from the graph, you would see approximately 16,000 items that is related to antibiotic and narcotics have been seized, as well as under CFDD, approximately 10,000 plus items were also confiscated and seized by the division due to either being unregistered or substandard or even falsified drugs. Next slide, please. What we are noticing, and again based on data from the World Health Organization, it is estimated that approximately 50% of drugs that are imported via our online or internet system or platforms have proven to be fake. Hence, it doesn't give any sort of therapeutic effect to the person using the drug. And we really want to caution our consumers in terms of purchasing over the net, because there's little regulation that the CFDD or the Drug Inspector could apply if drugs are imported through the internet. So we really want the consumers to take note of this and be very mindful when purchasing drug over the internet, because they stand the possibility and the chance of having imported and used drugs that will have no efficacy and may cause even harm to themselves and the family. We are also recognizing through the postal service system, the traditional postal system, there's an increased importation of drugs that are clearly unregistered, unlabeled. Again, the consumer is taking an unnecessary risk in involving themselves in these kind of importation where it can cause harm to themselves and their family as well. Next slide, please. In terms of the COVID vaccine, and this is quite topical for all of us, for the entire world, in fact. And in this slide, it demonstrates the system for the importation and the distribution of the vaccine. So we are saying that it's a secured, it's a closed and controlled channel of importation and distribution, which eliminates the possibility of fake vaccines entering into the system. At the point of the manufacturer, again, strict adherence is placed in the manufacturing facilities, in the manufacturing control, in the quality, safety, and efficacy of that drug before it leaves a particular site. Where we also would request the notice, not the notice of approval, sorry, the certificate of analysis and the batch release certificate that would be issued by either the national authority, or in some cases, WHO may also issue those batch release certificates, which are a critical document in determining exactly the content of the vaccine and also would relate to the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. before the vaccine reaches the consumer, it passes through the national regulatory body, which would validate, which would assess all of these documentation. Also, physical examination is done to do a verification. Again, all these are systems in place to ensure that the vaccine that is within the public health system is of a high standard and it meets all of the requirements for safety, efficacy, and all of the regulatory compliance issue. From the NAA, it goes to storage facilities, and again, these are controlled, and we would recognize the condition under which these vaccines must be kept, and is kept under those control and monitored on a constant basis. From there, it goes to the health center, the public health center facilities, and again, there's all control there, so there's no possibility of any vaccine that has not been approved to enter the system to reach the population. So the population can be assured that once they receive this vaccine from the public health system, that there's little chance of it being fake, and it would give you the protection that the vaccine would give each person. Next slide, please. I think this basically brings an end to this presentation. I thank you, and I'll pass you on to Ms. Candice Alcantara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, and some very important words there. Mr. Khan reminding us to refrain from ordering drugs online because of the limited regulation of such drugs. And he also emphasized all the processes that are in place to ensure that the drugs and vaccines used in Trinidad and Tobago are safe for use by the population. Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. And the Ministry of Health continues to have a positive relationship with all of the stakeholders that we work with as part of the national COVID-19 response. And the Faculty of Medical Sciences of the University of the West Indies is one such partner, and we've had a long-standing relationship with this organization. In fact, just recently, on the 7th of February, I believe it was, we co-hosted the Healthcare Worker Symposium with the Faculty of Medical Sciences of the University of the West Indies. Additionally, on the program here, we have had Professor Simangal, Dean of the Faculty, Professor Carrington of the Faculty, Professor Montai, and also Dr. Alexander, who's here with us this morning. And so we go now to Dr. Alexander, who will highlight the phases of vaccine approval.
Good morning, Ms. Alcantara, Honorable Minister, Dr. Hines, and Mr. Khan, members of the media and the viewing public. Today, we'll be talking about the regulation process for vaccines. First slide, please. So think about the regulation process similarly to the process you have to go through if you have to get a driver's license. You first have to pass your regulation test, and only after passing that test can you then be given permission to do the practical exam and then getting the license to drive. Similarly, vaccines have to go through a varied step process, ranging from preclinical all the way through to phase 4. Next slide. So the preclinical phase is where the vaccines are being tested on laboratory animals. And the results must be satisfactory in as much as showing that the vaccine is safe and that it is effective against the infection that the vaccine is being produced for. If those results are shown as such, it then moves on to phase 1. In phase 1, this is the introduction of testing the vaccine on healthy volunteers. It's a small number of healthy volunteers, and what is being looked for by the researchers, once again, is the safety of the vaccine and how effective it is against the infection. So they are monitoring the immune responses seen in these vaccinated individuals. In phase 1, the dosage of the vaccine is also being monitored to ensure that the best immune response is received. Once all the results are satisfactory, we move on to phase 2, whereby you are now increasing the number of volunteers that are in the study, and you're also diversifying the volunteers that are there by their ages, their genders, and their ethnicities. Remembering that the vaccine is for the worldwide population, so all of these must be tested to see how safe and how effective the vaccine is among these individuals. Once these results are again satisfactory, the vaccine progresses to phase 3. In phase 3, the number of volunteers increases by thousands because you want to get an idea of how the vaccine will work in the worldwide population. The diversity that was mentioned in phase 2 is still there, and we are once again looking at efficacy, safety, and dosage. Once these results are satisfactory, you are now moving the vaccine to the regulatory approval stage. This is when you have a board of independent reviewers consisting of medical personnel, researchers, scientists, and they are now looking at all the data presented to see safety, effectiveness, the quality of the vaccine, and the manufacturing process. Now, for the COVID-19 vaccines, what occurred was what is called a rolling review. Usually in vaccine approval, all the data from preclinical all the way to phase 3 is then given to the regulatory board. But during COVID-19, the data was being given at the end of each phase. So the independent boards were being aware of all the results that were coming in at the end of each phase, making the regulatory process a little faster. Now, once that independent regulatory board has given approval for that vaccine for general use, it is then released to the general public. However, it does not stop there. The vaccine progresses to phase 4. And in phase 4, there is continued monitoring of the health records and the data that is being recovered from the general public. Also, clinical studies continue to go throughout even while the vaccine is being given out to the general public. Next slide. And we do have some real-world data with respect to the Oxford AstraZeneca and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which has been approved for emergency use by the World Health Organization and is being utilized by the United Kingdom. And thus far, they have seen a 2/3 decrease in COVID-19 transmissions and infections due to the vaccination rollout program that the United Kingdom has implemented. And this decrease has been seen in both the over 80s and the under 80s population. Next slide. So the overall message is that we need to get vaccinated. Getting vaccinated limits the spread of SARS-CoV-2, which is responsible for COVID-19. It lowers the chance of being infected in the general population, and less persons being ill means less burden on our national healthcare system. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alexander. You would have noted a small adjustment in our usual format this morning, and you may have wondered where this person is in the order of presentations. But we go now to the Honorable Terence Dayalsingh, Minister of Health, for his statement.
Thank you, and good morning, Candice. Good morning to Dr. Hines, Dr. Alexander, Faz at Chemistry, Food and Drugs, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and the viewing and listening public wherever you are. So first of all, let me explain why I'm casually dressed. I just left the St. James Youth Facility. We just launched some exercise equipment under our NCD program and our TT Moves program. So that's why I'm casually dressed, and I'm trying to be at 2 places at the same time this morning. Okay, so you've gotten a pretty good understanding of how we regulate the entry of safe and effective drugs into Trinidad and Tobago. You've gotten from Dr. Alexander the process that goes into certifying that a drug is safe and effective. I will now try to give you an overall view of where we are with the COVAX facility, and there's some good news coming out of that. That's why I decided to come here personally this morning, straight from St. James. Before I get into that, I want to give you the latest update as to how we have distributed the 2,000 doses of COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccines, which we graciously got from the government and people of Barbados, for which we are thankful. So we got 2,000 doses. It's a 2-dose vaccine, as you know. So therefore, in the first instance, we could only vaccinate 1,000 persons. To date, across the 5 RHAs, we have vaccinated 991 persons, with the breakdown as follows. Between ERHA, Eastern and Northwest, none, because they were not, they did not have actual functional COVID facilities. The 3 RHAs that had functional COVID facilities, under NCRHA, 769, because they had 3 massive facilities, Cora, Arima, and Couva. Southwest, which had Augustus Long, 131. And Tobago, they vaccinated 91. So if the math is correct, 991. So by sometime today, we will reach 1,000, just 9 more to go. What has to happen then is that we need to keep that other 1,000 in cold storage now. So as the CMO has explained, the second dose is normally given 6 weeks to 3 months after. So we can't give out that extra 2,000 doses. We have to reserve it for these 1,000 roughly healthcare workers who have been vaccinated. I want to expand on something that Dr. Hines said, because members of the public are looking at the daily average and forming the opinion that we have no COVID in Trinidad and that we must do this and do that and open this and open that. Yes, while the daily cases are low, and that's good, and I want to thank Trinidad and Tobago for working with the Ministry of Health. I really want to thank all of us. We have done well. The fact of the matter is, for 2021 alone, and we have now come to the end of 2 months, for 2021 alone, we have clocked 554 cases. When you aggregate it, you get a different picture of where we are. And in February alone, we have had 140 cases. So our part of the global pandemic is not over. Trinidad and Tobago is not COVID-free when you look at the aggregated figures. So for 2021, 554 cases. For February alone, 140 cases. So contextualize that with the daily averages, which will give you some false sense of security. But this is the reality that we are facing. I want to talk now about what is happening internationally before I see what we are getting from the COVAX facility. You would have noticed in recent times that the voices of the international community are talking about the issue of vaccine equity. You would have heard Dr. Tedros speak about it. You would have heard the UN General Secretary speak about it. And I want to quote something that he has said. Just 10 countries have administered 75% of all COVID-19 vaccines. 10 countries have used up 75%, whilst more than 130 countries have not received a single dose. So that is not vaccine equity, that is vaccine inequity. And the voices of Dr. Tedros, the UN General Secretary, and together now with our own Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, as chairman of CARICOM, have all added their significant voices and advocacy to the issue of vaccine equity. And I just want to quote briefly from the news day today, where Dr. Rowley would have spoken at the Atlantic Conference. He said CARICOM is calling on the World Health Organization to hold a global summit to discuss the ability of countries to access COVID-19 vaccines. This was the communique coming out of it. And CARICOM said this summit, this global summit, is to address urgently equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, particularly for developing countries, which should be held in the context of the World Health Organization Act A Facilitation Council. The release goes on to say, CARICOM reiterated that it is dissatisfied and deeply concerned about the inequitable access to vaccines for small developing states like those in the community. And just to close off that, what is reported, an article in today's Guardian by Radica de Silva, the current COVID-19 vaccination drive could become useless in the future if there is no fair and equitable vaccination for all countries of the world. So said Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley as he addressed a seminar hosted by the Atlantic Council on Friday. So voices, globally and regionally, are raising their tone and volume to make sure that countries like Trinidad and Tobago and small countries are not disenfranchised when it comes to vaccine accessibility. And we hope that these voices will pay positive dividends in the near future. I come now to the COVAX facility and where we are. Just as a reminder, under the COVAX facility in phase 1, we will get proportional allocation of 20% of our population in tranches. I could announce that the first tranche has been approved through the COVAX facility that will be received in Trinidad, and the exact number is 100,800 doses. So our first tranche has been confirmed, 100,000 plus 800 doses. That first tranche goes like this. The steps that we have to take as a country and that we have been taking since February 15th, or things have been working very quickly. We had to sign off on an indemnity agreement with AstraZeneca. The cabinet, I took the note to cabinet. Cabinet met on Monday, and cabinet agreed with it and allowed the Minister of Finance, Minister of Health, to sign off on the indemnity agreement. I signed off that on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe, once I had cabinet approval. We also had to execute national regulatory approval. That was done. Mr. Faz Khan, that is why he is here this morning. We had to sign off on regulatory approval. Then we have to get the cost estimate on vaccine allocation. I can now tell you with certainty what the cost is. The cost for this initial 100,000 plus 800 doses is US $504,000. So US $504,000, which includes the actual cost of the vaccine, which is roughly about $4 US, shipping, insurance, and all associated costs. But in the first instance, Trinidad and Tobago will not be paying $504,000. Why? Because CARPHA has a grant, I believe, out of the European Union where they can assist countries that fall under CARPHA's remit, and Trinidad and Tobago will be receiving from CARPHA US $160,838 towards the purchase of vaccines. So, the cost on the vaccine allocation is US $504,000. You take away US $160,838 as CARPHA's contribution to that. It means the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension the taxpayer, will be paying for this first tranche of 100,000 plus 800 vaccines, $343,162 US. These monies will be paid as soon as we get a firm quotation now from PAHO. PAHO will give us that firm quotation sometime early next week. Once that happens, the funds will be deposited into PAHO's revolving fund, and the word coming out of PAHO, all things being equal, the first tranche should be here by the end of March. So that is the numbers we are playing with, the cost that we now know, and the estimated time of delivery, which is now dependent on receiving the firm quotation. What we have so far is a cost estimate. We are now waiting for the firm quotation. Once we execute that and the vaccines start to arrive by hopefully the end of March, according to PAHO, all things being equal, then we move into phase 1 of the distribution process. It is worth repeating what phase 1 is. Phase 1 is targeted to high-risk individuals, high-exposure individuals. So it means we continue to vaccinate our healthcare workers outside of this first 1,000 that we are doing. We estimate across the 5 RHAs, there are about 5,000 frontline healthcare workers. So we have another 4,000 to take care of. Then we do other healthcare workers. Then we do those over 60 and over in our NCD clinics at our public hospitals. That will take care of that first tranche of 50,000. Then we move into phase 2. Phase 2, once we get vaccines now for phase 2, we will then have to take care of those we did not touch in phase 1, because there will be more NCD, non-communicable diseases, persons with diabetes, hypertension, that we will not touch in phase 1. We will finish off that with the second phase of vaccines. And then we move into the second phase where we target essential workers. The essential workers, as we have said, but it's worth repeating, will be those persons who we depend on to keep the wheels of the country going. That will be frontline persons in the police force, Coast Guard, Army, our teachers who are now out, especially those in Forms 4, 5, and 6, SCA, which is due to come out soon, principals, sanitation workers, parliamentarians, immigration, customs. Those are some of the categories that come to mind off the top of my head. But at the ministry, we have developed a very detailed grid of all healthcare workers, frontline workers. We will also be targeting very early, as we have been stating, the residents in long-stay homes. We have already gotten an indicative number of, I believe, 900 out of the total population where we have consent. So those are the numbers and those are the categories of persons that we are looking at. So ladies and gentlemen, just to recap, the COVID virus is still with us. As we said, in February alone, 140 cases. For this year, 500 cases plus. I have given you a detailed update on where we are with COVAX, and I'm very happy to announce that by the end of March, all things being equal, we will start phase 1 in a very robust way. Thank you very much, Candice.
Thank you very much, Minister Dayal Singh, for that very important update. And we go now into the question and answer segment. And we ask media representatives to please begin by stating your name and the name of the media house that you represent before putting forward your 2 brief questions to our panelists. In order for us to get the most out of this segment, we ask that you please be brief. And if you have additional questions, we will try to come back to you. We begin with questions from AZP News, please.
Hi, good morning. Private Harry, azpnews.com. My first question is for Minister Dayal Singh. Minister, the indemnity agreement we're signing for these vaccines from COVAX facility for from AstraZeneca. Can you tell us what exactly does that agreement entails? And second question, Dr. Hines. Dr. Hines, the rolling average you said is 5 per day. And I know recently we had, I think 10% of the cases were from people who are returning. Can you tell us now where are these new cases coming from? Has the contact tracing been done? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Prior. So, in essence, it's a legal document which has to be vetted by the Attorney General and the SolGen. It basically outlines what the manufacturer takes responsibility for, and that is why FAS is here this morning. So the manufacturer of any drug or any vaccine can be liable for gross manufacturing errors, stuff like that. So it spells out what the manufacturer is responsible for and what the country signing the agreement is responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Bihari. First of all, just before I answer you, I just need to correct something that you said. Maybe that you stated a little loosely. You said 10% of the cases came from repatriation, whereas it was really that 10% or so of the repatriated cases had shown positive results. Slightly different. Now, it's a good question that you've asked. The impression that the virus has to come from somewhere strange or special in the midst of what is essentially low-level community spread. I'm not sure why that impression still persists, but it's an opportunity to clarify and to remind the population the virus is coming from the people in the population who have it. Until we have no people in the population with the virus, there's always going to be some level of transmission between either overtly ill or asymptomatic, meaning they don't have any signs or symptoms, but still infected and therefore potentially infectious people. And that was one of the challenges that this particular virus has. The virus tends to be, in at least half of the cases, asymptomatic while still being infectious. And because of that, people can pick up virus from people who don't look ill. People can be moving around because they don't feel ill. And there's the risk of them transmitting illness, which again brings us back to the importance of those public health regulations. Most importantly, the mask wearing, which is going to reduce your risk of shedding infective droplets even if you don't know you're ill. Also, the physical distancing, which reduces your risk of droplets getting to you or from you to someone else because they can't travel the distance between you and the next person. The hand hygiene, the risk of your contaminated hands from touching a surface with live virus in droplets and then taking that hand and touching your face or your mucous membranes is reduced by the hand hygiene recommendations. So all of these things are the things that are going to help us to reduce the risk of transmission from the unknown infected persons. Yes, the contact tracing has been done for those who have been exposed, who are known to have been exposed to a confirmed case, and those individuals have, of course, been put into quarantine. But beyond that, beyond the contact tracing, the other set of behaviors is absolutely necessary to help us drive the transmission downward. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much for those responses, Minister and Dr. Hines. We go now to TV6 for 2 questions, please.
Hi, good morning. Renessa Cutting, TV6 News. I noted on Friday that a private entity put out a press release indicating that they have intentions of partnering with the Ministry of Health here and in the other territories where they have a presence to fund and acquire vaccines. I'd just like to know whether, well, this is more or less one question. There's a few questions related to this one topic, but I just want to know whether our ministry has received formally or informally such a proposal and what such an arrangement would look like. Is it that any entity with the funds, with the requisite funds, can approach the ministry to acquire vaccines and then they could probably have a percentage for their employees? And I also want to know, I know that you had mentioned that our government would not mandate that citizens have to take vaccines. And I'm wondering whether private entities can mandate that their employees take vaccines in order to secure their employment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you have three questions here. So the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago welcomes any initiative by private sector organizations to vaccinate their employees free of charge. That should be welcomed. The Ministry of Health has received offers, and I spoke to this on an interview with The Guardian, I believe, last week. The private sector has in fact been reaching out to us, but we will only be using vaccines which government purchases for members of the public. What the article says, if you read it closely, is that this particular entity, and they are to be applauded, will purchase vaccines from the private sector. Now let me explain what is going to happen. At some point in time, I can't say when, the COVID-19 vaccines is going to become a commodity, is going to become commoditized. And like any other vaccine, I know people are focused on COVID-19 vaccines, thinking that we are doing this for the first time. Every single vaccine in Trinidad and Tobago right now, MMR, whatever, is available free through the public sector, and you could pay for it through the private sector. The same thing will happen with COVID-19 vaccines eventually. So any private entity, once the vaccine is registered through a local agent, any private entity can purchase the vaccines for their employees. So that is one. Two, whether a private entity can make it mandatory, no. No private entity or the government can make it mandatory that persons be vaccinated. Vaccinations, as we have always said on these platforms, continues to be voluntary, but it is highly, highly recommended. And as you saw with the high uptake with the healthcare workers, what that speaks to, Renessa, is a very high degree of vaccine acceptance. And the healthcare workers are once again leading the charge in this thing, which will then have a snowball and ripple effect within the national population. So as more and more vaccinations become available, as the COVID-19 vaccines become commoditized, and more people can manufacture, it's been approved by WHO, you will see, but my crystal ball can't give you a time, but you will see, as in the case with MMR, it will be available through the public sector and through the private sector. Thank you very much, Renessa.
Thank you very much, Minister. And we go now to Guardian Media Limited, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Soini Gray from Guardian Media. I just wanted to get an update from the health minister. Barbados has managed to vaccinate about 29,000 people in about 2 weeks. I know we discussed the vaccination schedule last Sunday in the CNC3 news report. I wanted to know if the minister is still confident that we can possibly achieve 75% of the population vaccinated by the end of the year, especially considering our size and mass and how complicated that could be. Thank you.
Okay, so vaccinating a certain percentage of the population by a certain timeline depends on certain factors under the control of the ministry and certain factors out of the control. I am confident that if we get enough vaccines and the supply is liberalized, and the calls by people like our Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, to have this World Summit on Vaccines and Equity, the calls by Dr. Tedros for equity, the calls by the United Nations General Secretary. I am confident that once we get more and more vaccines, we can vaccinate higher percentages of the population in the shortest possible space of time. But what is out of my control is the actual supply. So therefore, I can't commit to a timeline and a percentage. But we are working with COVAX. We are hoping that all these voices of global leaders and our own Prime Minister to get COVAX on a different footing, could lead to the more equitable distribution of vaccines? So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you very much, Minister. We go to questions now from Newsday newspaper, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ria Chitram. I'm from Newsday. I just have two questions, well, a series of questions actually for Mr. Khan. I just wanted to find out how widespread are the cases of fake drugs? What are those drugs, for example? Are they painkillers, blood pressure medications, etc.? And has there ever been a case of fake vaccines in TNT? And would this be among the private or public health sector? And for what viruses or complications?
Please?
Sorry, could you just repeat your questions, please?
Have there been fake vaccines?
And so just to let you know, Mr. Khan, the questions focused on how widespread are the instances of fake drugs in Trinidad and Tobago, and has there been a case of fake vaccine in Trinidad and Tobago? And if you could give us some background on that, please.
Okay, so what we have found during our pharmacovigilance, either at the retail point or at the ports of entry, there are more drugs that are entering that are unregistered. And if it is, you remember my presentation, unregistered means it hasn't gone through our regulatory approval process. It hasn't gone to the Drug Advisory Committee, which is the technical committee appointed by the minister that evaluates the drug and makes a recommendation to the minister. So what we have seen is unregistered drugs that is meant for a different market that enters into the country. So you may see drug that may have a foreign language that was not meant for Trinidad and Tobago because it doesn't satisfy the special requirements, environmental condition, and it would affect the stability of the drug if it is imported that was not meant for Trinidad and Tobago. With respect to vaccines, we haven't had an instance of reported case of fake vaccine that was administered or was imported in Trinidad and Tobago thus far. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. And just a reminder that we also have Dr. Alexander here with us. And I was reminded that the relationship with the University of the West Indies Faculty of Medical Sciences in St. Augustine is even deeper because we also had Professor Simeon with us on this program and Professor Hutchinson. So the relationship continues to be very strong. We go to a follow-up question from AZP News, please.
Good morning again. I have a question for Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan, there are a lot of alternative medicines in the country. Is there any sort of regulation in terms of that? How does your division look into these things, and can the public, for example, come to you, if they want to use any of these alternative medicines? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. So our regulation is based on the Food and Drug Act and Regulation, Chapter 3001. It covers all pharmaceuticals. So regardless of whether it's a traditional medicine that's manufactured locally or imported, whether it's a herbal supplement, it falls under the definition of drug. So within the framework of the regulations, there are systems and requirements to register these drugs to ensure that it is safe, it is of a high quality, and will not cause any harm to the consumer or the patient that uses the particular medication. So yes, an importer or manufacturer should come to us, in fact, and we advise the public, if it is you're getting involved in these kind of manufacturing, that you come to the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, get the necessary requirements so that your product, when it reaches the market, would not cause harm to the general public and will be in compliance with the regulatory requirement as per contained in the Food and Drug Act and regulations.
Let me just add, as Minister of Health, I would have signed off on a complaint to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in November 2018 on this whole issue of claims being made by a particular individual about what his herbs can and cannot do. So we take this issue of claims, fake drugs, very, very seriously. And as I said, I signed off on a file to the DPP in November of 2018 on that. I think it's the first time a file has gone to the DPP on that issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan and Minister. We go now to TV6 for a follow-up question, please. Taking the follow-up question.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Vanessa Cutting, TV6 News. Could the ministry state what is the investigative process like when these types of drugs are encountered? What are the penalties for persons found to be guilty of peddling these types of drugs? And maybe what have been the outcomes so far? If you could probably tell us maybe like last year or last 2 years or so for persons found to be involved in this trade.
Very much, and we go to Mr. Khan for a response to this question because the division that he heads directly deals with matters such as this. We go to Faz Khan. Okay,
thank you again for that question. So again, within the Chemistry, Food and Drug Division, within the Ministry of Health, and even within the Drug Inspectorate, there are SOPs or procedures that must be followed when a complaint is made regarding, let's say, fake drug. So it involves a number of different steps, such as investigating the complaint first to verify whether the content of the complaint is accurate in terms of representing what actually took place. An investigation is also followed with the manufacturer, especially with the imported product, to get information from the manufacturer. At the point of importation also, we'll go back to the point of importation. And we do have an electronic system called the TTBiz Link system that all agencies are involved and participate and interact with this system. And through this system, you can do tracing to see exactly who imported the particular drug, where it came from, the country of origin. And from that data and that analysis of the data, we can now take action in terms of either a recall, if a recall has to be done, if it is determined that this particular drug is in fact dangerous to the consumer. Secondly, as the Honorable Minister indicated, take legal action in terms of engaging the DPP. And within recent time, we have had a number of cases that were referred through our legal department to the DPP for further investigation to determine whether there was any criminal intent and what action can be taken by the state against those individuals who were alleged to have imported unregistered or drugs that may have caused injury to any patient or whether the consumer use the drug. Thank you.
We have come to the end of today's media conference. Today we were reminded that COVID-19 is still with us and we all still have to be vigilant and do our part. Just in February this month, we had 140 cases. We also got an update from the Minister of Health, the Honorable Terence Dayal Singh, on the receipt of vaccines from the COVAX facility. We looked at all the processes that are taken during the preclinical phases and the regulatory processes here in Trinidad and Tobago that are implemented to make sure that we keep the population safe. Please, everyone, remember to play your part, wear your mask, and do have a good day.
So I've worked in immunisation for 30 years, and this is a very exciting time because these vaccines have been produced at quite a fast pace. And that's because we've been able to put more focus and resources into developing them and to build on all the technology that we've